That being said, we're on a big black bus called the Trolley of the Doom. We're driving those streets out there, and those poor souls possessed with Jose, Jack, Tito, or the worst one of them all, ladies and gentlemen, is the dreaded Madam Whiteclaw spirit. They're the worst, and they travel in packs, and they're going to try and scare us. They're going to yell things at us. They're going to make scary noises. They might even go buck in the night. And folks, you just might see some things you can never unsee. And we're going to ignore them because this is my show, not theirs. Mine only lasts an hour. Theirs goes all night long. However, there's a select few out there who do know the magic words. Those words are, "You're doomed." We know this already. We're on the Trolley of the Doom. When we hear that cry, folks, we are required to reply back in one loud unified voice, 5 simple words. Yes, we are the doomed. I know we're a small group, but we're going to practice, make sure we get it right. Tyler, would you help us out? You're doomed! Yes, we are the doomed! All right. Tyler's going to play Read 60 Messages. During a prohibition bar raid, when some extremely rude person hit me in the head with a bar stool. It hurt a lot, and I died. However, the person who killed me, they hid my body so well, they did not find it for more than 50 years. Tonight, I'm going to show you the exact spot where they found Bartender Joe. So folks, I have been doomed to roam the streets of Key West for over 90 years. It is very lonely and very boring, so I decided to get a real job, and here I am. It just got less lonely, though, thanks to you. And as soon as you boarded this trolley, folks, you joined me in the ranks of the doomed. Congratulations. We're all now doomed. Only one person aboard not doomed. Our driver, Tyler. Everybody say hi, Tyler.
Hi, Tyler.
Now, he's not doomed because he has a very difficult job tonight. I get to tell you the tantalizing true tales that make up our twisted past, while he safely navigates us and this big black bus through the very narrow streets of the Yellow Bones without killing anybody. So everybody say, good luck, Tyler.
Good luck, Tyler.
Now, folks, did you catch that? I called it the Yellow Bones and not Key West. That was this island's original name. Now, it was called the Isle of Bones because there was a Native American group called the Calusa who lived here. And our ground is very hard. It is mostly coral and limestone. So the Calusa were unable to dig graves using their primitive tools. So they would simply put a stake in their dead, put them out on the beach, and let Mother Nature take it from there. We're visiting that beach on tonight's journey. Now, when the Spanish explorers first arrived on our shores more than 500 years ago, they were looking for the fountain of youth. Instead, they landed on a beach full of bleached white bones. So the Spanish named the island Cayo Hueso, a phrase you'll see a lot throughout town. Folks, Cayo means key. Hueso means bone. The key, or the Isle of Bones. Now, when the English settlers first started to arrive, they did not know a whole lot of Spanish. They did think that Cayo meant key because we were on a string of keys, but they thought Hueso meant west because to them that's what it sounded like. So we became Key West through a mistranslation. Now, it is a long-standing belief spirits cannot cross over water. That belief goes all the way back to ancient Greek mythology and the river Styx, which separated the living from the dead. Folks, in case you haven't noticed yet, the Isle of Bones is 100% surrounded by water. Welcome aboard, my dear. Congratulations, you're now doomed.
Great.
The Isle of Bones is 100% surrounded by water. That means if any of you die here, you're staying here. Well, let's face it, there's a lot worse places to be dead than Key West, Florida. No, Key West is one of this country's most haunted towns. Okay, this little town comes in right underneath Savannah, Georgia. And in this town, the dead population outnumbered the living by more than 4 to 1. So Key West has about 25,000 full-time year-round living residents. But our little 19-acre cemetery in the center of town has over 100,000 dead residents. But that does not include the dead residents residing in the other burial grounds that are scattered throughout this tiny island. And those burial grounds are sitting right underneath your guest house or your favorite bar, especially if any of you are staying in Old Town. Now, those early settlers to Key West, they did bring with them their religious and their superstitious beliefs. They passed them on from generation to generation, and many people still hold on to those beliefs to make unnatural things happen. Not only is Key West a very haunted town, to this day it remains very superstitious. There's a very easy to see superstition. When you are walking the neighborhoods near the historic seaport, I want you to look at the porch ceilings. You're going to notice many of them painted a particular shade of blue. A blue very similar to the blue on that Ron John's building in front of us. Folks, that's not just any random color blue. That is a very powerful and a very magical blue. The name of that blue is haint blue, spelled H-A-I-N-T. The word haint comes from our Gullah language, a Creole language that started in the Georgia, South Carolina area, and it's the Gullah word for the word haunt, which is a spirit with a bad intention. They believe painting your porch ceiling haint blue will prevent the spirits from coming into your house. You'll see haint blue painted on porch ceilings all up and down the Atlantic coast. Now it is believed to stop a spirit from coming in because it resembles the color of water. Since they believe spirits can't cross water, they believe a spirit will come to your front porch, they'll see that color blue, they'll think it's water and turn around. So when you get home from your trip, if you want to protect your house from spirits, you can buy that beautiful haint blue at your local Home Depot. But it does come with a warning. Haint blue will not stop your annoying relatives or your in-laws from entering your house. But, folks, if you have problems with hornets and wasps building nests in your porch, paint your porch ceiling haint blue. That is a true fact. They're going to view it as the open sky where the predators leave, and where the predators live, and they will leave your porch without the use of pesticides. Another good thing, it will also reduce the number of mosquitoes that are around your house. Spiders too, yes. Mm-hmm. Now, folks, those early settlers to Key West, I'm sorry, I already did that. I'm really, really hot up here, guys, okay? I'm so sorry, and I've been dead for a really long time. There's a lot of cobwebs up here, all right? Now, in our over 500-year history, we've had a lot of things contribute to our dead population. Over the years, we have seen death caused by mayhem, murder, betrayals, suicides, piracy, fires, floods, and of course hurricanes. But before antibiotics were discovered, diseases were the major killer. And there were two diseases feared more than any other, and they were tuberculosis and yellow fever. Now, tuberculosis was also called consumption, and it brought with it a very slow, agonizingly painful death. As that disease would consume you from the inside out, it would liquefy your lungs and you would slowly drown to death. Second disease, appropriately named, gave you a fever and it turned you yellow. But then in a couple of days, you get to violently vomit blood. Then you start bleeding from your eyes, your nose, and your ears. And a day before dying, you start leaking blood through every pore of your skin. Living with yellow fever was not comfortable and it wasn't pretty, but you didn't suffer long. Folks, if you caught yellow fever on Monday, you were dead by Sunday. Now, in the 19th and the early 20th centuries, there was so much death on this island that at night our residents would hear the creepy sound of the horse-drawn hearses rolling over the cobblestone streets, picking up body after decaying body from the side of the road. The phrase, "bring out your dead," rang very loud and clear here in Key West. Tonight, Tyler is going to be driving us down those exact same streets. I'm going to be pointing out several buildings where paranormal activity has been recorded and a supernatural presence has been seen or felt. Over the years, many visitors to Key West have had very bizarre encounters at these locations. I cannot guarantee an encounter tonight, but I'm going to give you a few tips to help you know if one is occurring. You need to pay close attention to your senses. If you develop goosebumps, if you get a sudden heaviness in your chest making it difficult to breathe, or you feel the hair on the back of your neck stand up, those all indicate something nasty is very close by. The smell of a cologne or a cigar that seems out of place, the laughter of children, the crying of children, even dead bodies being dragged across the floor have all been heard on our tour. And pay close attention to the temperature immediately surrounding you. Guys, I know it's a muggy night, but if you notice a sudden drop in that temperature, that means energy is being sucked up as a presence tries to manifest. And then as a last minute reminder, please keep the cell phone set to silent or vibrate. But guys, I do want you to have your cameras ready at all times. I encourage you all to take a lot of photos and videos tonight, especially of yours truly. No? Fine. If you sense a presence, start taking several pictures back to back, 3 or 4 of them in a row with flash or no flash, that doesn't matter. If you capture it, it's going to show up as either blue smoke like mist, a dark smudge, kind of like a fingerprint, dancing lights, or balls of energy in the shape of an orb. But it is not uncommon for cameras, especially iPhone cameras, to malfunction during our tour. If that happens, do not worry too much. They will start working a few minutes after the tour is done. Now, while we're driving through the streets of the Isle of Bones tonight, I'm going to be telling you about 4 different types of haunts we have on the island. First one is called an intelligent haunt. Ta-da! It means we can interact with the living. It does not mean we are smart, okay? But an intelligent haunt is somebody who died from a traumatic event, like being hit in the head with a bar stool, or somebody who died with unfinished business to attend to and they're looking for help. The second's the most common here. It's called a residual haunt. There's a traumatic event that sends a blast of energy into the atmosphere, and it will imprint a specific event on an item or a location. Like a recording in a loop, the event replays over and over until the end of time. Now the third is a term I'm sure you've all heard. It is called poltergeist activity. The word poltergeist is German for noisy spirit. These spirits want your attention. If you have a poltergeist on your house, you're going to see your artwork come flying off the wall, your living room furniture will rearrange itself, you might even see a small child go flying through the room. Now, if we see any flying children tonight, I'm the first one off the bus. Okay, because let's be real, children are terrifying enough on the ground, let alone flying through the air. And then lastly, here in Key West, we have the one that we encounter the most on the tour. It is called a shadow person or a shadow figure. You know the creepy feeling you get like there's somebody watching you from behind? So you slowly turn to see who's there, and then out of the corner of your eye, you see a silhouette of a person just dart away. You've just encountered a shadow person. You can no longer see it, but you still feel it watching you. If you have encountered one, you know that there's a certain level of fear that comes along with it. So those are the 4 haunts that we might experience tonight. But folks, you are in Key West, and we're famous for another spirit. Now, we don't lump it with the others because it doesn't reside in the spirit realm. This spirit possesses the living. People possessed with this particular spirit, well, they start talking about their speech. Then they start stumbling on the street. And eventually, folks, they will slide right out of the bar stools. And I'm talking about that liquid spirit. As a dead bartender, it's my favorite. That's how I made my money. But have you ever tried to hold an intelligent conversation with people possessed by the liquid spirits? It can be a challenge. That being said, we're on a big black bus called the Trolley of Doom. We're driving those streets out there. And those poor souls possessed with Jose, Jack, Tito, or the worst one of them all, ladies and gentlemen, is the dreaded Madam White Claw spirit. They're the worst, and they travel in packs. And they're going to try and scare us. They're going to yell things at us. They're going to make scary noises. They might even go buck in the night. And folks, you just might see some things you can never unsee. And we're going to ignore them because this is my show, not theirs. Mine only lasts an hour. Theirs goes all night long. However, there's a select few out there who do know the magic words. Those words are, "You're doomed." We know this already. We're on the Trolley of the Doom. When we hear that cry, folks, we are required to reply back in one loud, unified voice, 5 simple words. Yes, we are the doomed. And I know we're a small group, but we're going to practice, make sure we get it right. Tyler, would you help us out? You're doomed! Yes, we are the doomed! All right. Tyler's going to play a brief safety message, and we will start our tour.
Good evening. I'm delighted you could participate in our excursion. To avoid possible mayhem, please pay attention. Standing may cause vertigo. Don't do it. Keep your...
In fact, Key West's most famous resident will be turning 120 years old in October, and he is this year's Fantasy Fest Grand Marshal. I'm talking about Robert the Dow! Now, Robert the Dow was gifted to a young boy by the name of Robert Eugene Otto on his 4th birthday by his grandfather. The Dow was purchased in Germany. He stands 40 inches tall. He is stuffed with a wood wool called Excelsior and dressed in a sailor suit. Robert Eugene Otto also had a Bahamian nanny, but she got fired for practicing voodoo. Leaving the house, she placed a voodoo hex on the Dow, but that did not stop the Dow and the boy from becoming best friends. They became so close that the Dow insisted on having the boy's first name. From that day forward, Robert Eugene was simply called Gene. Well, Gene and Robert would be playing in Gene's room, and Gene's mother would often hear a second, very sinister voice coming from the room. Open the door, see Gene and Robert playing on the floor, but she'd see all Gene's toys broken. She she asked Gene what happened, he simply pointed to the doll and said, "Robert did it." And that was Gene's reply for everything in the house. Drawings on the wall, repairman's tools missing, even servants being locked into the closet, his reply was always, "Robert did it." So after a period of time, Mrs. Otto grew tired of it. She banishes the doll to a closet up in the turret attic, and Gene is sent to boarding school. He grows up, travels the world, becomes a famous artist. In Paris, France, he meets the love of his life, a beautiful concert pianist by the name of Anne. After getting married, Gene brings Anne back to Key West to the Otto family home, where this guy was patiently waiting. And as soon as Gene stepped into his childhood home, he changed, insisting that the doll come down from the closet and join them in the main part of the house. Gene would set him a dinner plate at the dinner table. Gene would let the doll share their marital bed. And Gene would disappear for hours painting with his best friend by his side. Rumors started flying around town that Gene became abusive towards his beautiful wife. Police were called to do a wellness check. When they arrived, they found Anne had been beaten and locked in a closet for 3 days. When they questioned Gene, what do you think he had the nerve to say? Exactly. So Anne ordered the doll back into the closet, but he would escape. Would be seen sitting on a chair looking out the front window, just watching everybody walk the street. People would avoid the block altogether to avoid his beady little eyes. Now he no longer is at the house. He's at the East Martel Museum by the airport, where you can go visit him on your own time, thank you. There are some things your host tonight is too afraid to go see, and he's number one on my list. If you visit the doll, be respectful and obey his 3 rules. You have to greet him, you have to ask before taking his picture, and you must thank him for his time. Failure to do any one of those 3 will cause him to curse you. That doll receives over 1,000 apology letters every year, and the staff are required to read him every single one. And since he's the Grand Marshal, I for one will be boycotting this year's Fantasy Fest Parade, because how many people in attendance are going to obey his 3 rules? Now, his former home today is a very beautiful guest house. It's called the Artist House. Once we make this turn, it'll be on the left side of the trolley, the gray house with the lavender shutters. As we drive by, folks, I want you to look very closely at the first corner, because that is the turret. And the room at the top of that turret is Robert's old room. It's her first day driving. That room right there, folks, is Robert's old room. You can still rent that room nightly, if you dare. But strange things still occur inside that beautiful home. Now, our first burial ground on tonight's journey is the Memorial Gardens of the St. Paul's Episcopal. Yes, we are the doom. St. Paul's Episcopal Church coming up here on our left. The residual haunting of children playing around a stone statue of an angel has been captured in this first corner right here. Now, this land used to belong to John W.C. Fleming, a wealthy landowner and one of Key West's founding fathers. The land was gifted to the church upon his death by his widow, with the condition he remain buried here forever. The church you see today is the 4th one to be built on the property. 2 were lost in hurricanes and 1 was lost in a fire, but Mr. Fleming is still underneath that church. In fact, this one has a headstone for him in the floor of the church. Now, in the late 1800s, cigar manufacturers fleeing the unrest in Cuba brought their businesses to Key West, one of the wealthiest being Francisco Madero. In 1889, Francisco built a beautiful home to entice the love of his life, Enriqueta, to be his bride. It worked. She married him. So I want you to remember that, young man. If you want to get a wife, you need to build a mansion. But she also gave him 8 children. Now, Francisco's business would take him back and forth to Cuba quite often. On one of those trips, he dies rather suspiciously, mourning the loss of her husband and tending to 8 children now with no father. One evening, Enriqueta hears on her front door. She opens the front door and she finds another woman dressed all in black, just like she was. That woman claimed to be Maria Morero. She said she was Francisco's first wife from Cuba, whom he forgot to divorce. Came to Key West on a fake visa with a fake marriage license, challenged the estate in a court of law, and won. Enriqueta and her 8 children were kicked out with only what they could carry. On the night that they were kicked out, a crowd gathers in front of the house. Enriqueta stands on the top step of her front porch and declares to the crowd, "You may take away my home, but my spirit will never leave." And she kept her word. On her death, her spirit returned to the residence to keep a watchful eye, and it is now on your right with the orange shutters. It is now a 21 and over guest house. Guests staying there have seen Enriqueta's ghost passing through the wall separating 2 rooms that once made the nursery, and across the hall they still see her brushing her long dark hair in the mirror as she awaits the return of Francisco. Now, if something built in 1889 is too old for you to stay in, or you might have somebody under 21 with you, Might I recommend our beautiful historic La Concha Hotel here on our left. Built in 1926, this remains the tallest building in Old Town. 13 people have jumped to their death from the rooftop observation deck, which has since been enclosed and is being turned into guest rooms. Now, on New Year's Eve 1982, there's a party on the 5th floor. Young employee cleaning up afterwards, wheeling a cart of dirty dishes down the hallway, backs up to the elevator, presses the button, hears the elevator doors open, steps backwards without looking, and he plummets 5 floors to his death as the elevator malfunctioned and stopped on the 6th floor. People staying in this hotel to this day still hear him screaming from the elevator shaft. Gentlemen, hold on to your seats for this story. 2 very young victims of yellow fever lived and died in what's now called the oldest house in all of South Florida. Today it's a museum, but it was built in 1829 as the home of Captain Francis Watlington, his extremely good-looking wife Emmeline, and their 9 daughters. Think about that, gentlemen. Back then, that would be 10 females, 1 house without a bathroom. Scariest story you're going to hear all night long, let me tell you. Captain Wallington was a politician gone on a business trip when yellow fever strikes, killing 1 daughter right away. A second rapidly deteriorates. Knowing death is coming, Emmeline rocks her until she draws her last breath. Guests and employees still hear Emmeline rocking that daughter in a room where there is no rocking chair. And here on our left is the oldest house museum. 1st floor, the room all the way to the right, is where Emmeline still rocks. Now, Dr. Joseph Yates Porter was our state's first publicly elected health official. He dedicated his life to finding a cure for yellow fever because it killed his mother shortly after he was born. Dr. Porter was born in 1847 on the 2nd floor of the green and white house to your left. 80 years later, he died in the exact same room. Trying to find a cure for yellow fever, he would conduct quarantine experiments inside of his home, and many of his patients died there. For 30 consecutive years, folks, more than 50 people per year died inside that house. Now, in true QS fashion, today it is a bar, but only open for private events. Guests and employees have seen the poltergeist activity, wine glasses flying off of the rack. They've heard the residual haunts of piano music coming from a 2nd floor room where there is no piano. And in that room where Dr. Porter was born and later died, they still feel his very strong presence, a very cold draft, and directly beneath the room on the 1st floor, dimes keep falling through the ceiling. Folks, Dr. Porter charged a dime for his consultation back in the day. We still have a tormented Dr. Porter on our island. Now, that Porter Mansion, that's home to 3 of the haunts I mentioned during our introduction. Our next location has all 4. We're going inside of this location. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, you can stay on the trolley with Tyler, but I believe in 2 things: safety in numbers and air conditioning. Now, once we make this turn, folks, I want you to look through the front window of the trolley. You're going to see a tower coming into view that stands 65 feet above Mallory Square. A replica of the 85-foot tall tower is found here in the 1800s. Men would stand at the top of the tower watching our reef for ships to wreck. When a wreck was spotted, a cry of "Wreck ashore!" would be heard echoing through town. Every wrecker would then jump into their small boats called sloops, and they would race to the wreck. First one to arrive was called the master wrecker. Now, those wreckers, they would save some people, but they were more focused on that cargo. Gathering as much of it as they could, they bring it to Key West and they would auction it off on Sundays, with the master wrecker always getting the biggest share of the auction. Wrecking was so lucrative, it made Key West the wealthiest town in the United States per capita for more than 86 years. Keep in mind, in the 1800s, a lot of those seafarers did not know how to swim. Imagine for a moment, you're on a ship before life vests were invented. Your ship crashed, it's sinking fast, and you don't know how to swim. Aren't you going to grab onto anything you can to save your life? No wonder the over 500 artifacts inside this museum are believed to be spiritually possessed. Coming up on your left, we have one of those sloops. Everybody, that is the remains of what used to be the beautiful sloop Mary. Now, I do not recommend taking Mary out on the waters, okay? She's not very seaworthy these days. Like a lot of other things in Key West, Mary today is more chicken coop than anything else. Speaking of chickens, have you seen them? Alright, if not, folks, stop drinking because they're everywhere. But here's some useful information for you. They are protected. Harming one is a misdemeanor with a $500 fine. Killing one is a felony, a $1,000 fine, and jail time. Folks, Key West is the only place where a chicken can cross the street without his motives being questioned. Now Tyler will exit first, followed by me. Welcome, guys. Careful on the stairs. Settling down.
How was your trip today? We didn't see you though. We something.
I don't blame you.
Staying here in Key West. You are in a basement cellar. Right now, your heads are all 1 foot below sea level. And that is why I stand. I do not know how to swim. But in a town that battles floodwaters all the time, why would we even want to have a basement? You guys are too young to remember the days before refrigerators. Basements are always the coolest part of a building. Before refrigerators, folks, we survived with ice houses. Now, in case you haven't noticed, it gets hot in Key West, so they would have to import the ice from New England. They would line the walls with it, and like your refrigerator today, ice houses would keep our food and beverages longer. But they would also be used as morgues. The ice would keep the bodies preserved until they could be buried. You think it smells great now, don't you? Folks, imagine this room in the middle of the summer when you have 25 dead people in here rotting of yellow fever right next to our Tuesday night dinner. And that ice melts as this ice house heats up and it becomes an oven. Delicious. Now, probably should have warned you ahead of time. Oops. Folks, the paranormal activity inside this museum has drastically risen over the past 16 years. The increase in that activity is believed to be tied to one single event. 4:30 a.m., July 1st, 2008. The motion alarms at the very top of the tower were set off, but none of the lower alarms were. Thinking it's a malfunction, the alarm company simply silences the alarm and fails to notify authorities. 9 a.m., a young employee comes to the museum to open up for the day's business. He starts to climb to the top of that tower to raise the United States flag. As he gets closer to the top, though, he starts to see what he thinks is red paint dripping through the boards above him. But when he reaches the top deck, he finds a young man dead, lying in his own pool of blood from a self-inflicted gunshot. 2 days later, that employee is closing up the museum at the end of the day. While he is down here in the cellar turning off the displays and the lights, he notices his shadow moving very erratically. So the employee stands there and he watches. The shadow, however, did not stand still. The shadow crawled across the floor. It climbed up that wall. It crept across the ceiling until it got to right here. It then goes through the ceiling towards the tower above. Now the employee described the shadow figure as having very long arms and legs that were reaching out for him. And he said that it moved in a very quick spider-like motion. Folks, the young man who was found at the top of this tower was very tall and very lanky. Many people believe that when he passed, part or all of his spirit attached itself to the museum, forming that shadow figure, because the shadow was never seen before this tragedy. Now, the employee sees the shadow figure a lot. Always makes him feel very uncomfortable. But he sees it so many times, he starts talking to the other employees about it. And he was shocked to find out that every employee had several encounters with that shadow person. So those employees decided to do what a lot of people do when they're faced with a scary situation. Try to make it less scary by poking fun at it. So they gave it a nickname. Daddy Longlegs. To this very day, we still see Daddy Longlegs. Now, months later, alarms at the top of the tower go off again. This time, police are notified. 3 officers and the museum manager come and check things out. They do not find anything wrong. They reset the alarm and they leave. Exactly 1 hour later, the alarms go off again. Same 3 officers return with the manager, but this time 1 officer stays outside by the squad cars. 2 officers and the museum manager enter the museum and then do something that you are never supposed to do in a horror movie. Split up! Manager went to the top of the tower alone. 1 officer stayed on the main floor directly above us all alone. And the last officer comes into the basement alone. The officer who came down here, when he gets done checking behind every artifact and in every little nook and cranny, he turns to go up these very stairs. Oh, ma'am, that door is locked.
Oh,
If you want to go, if you need to leave, you can go up the stairs here,
okay.
and then the door on that wall, just give the bar on the door a good hard push and it'll open up for you.
Oh, wait, thank you.
But he turns to go up these stairs, and he comes face to face with a full apparition. Now, he described the apparition to be depressed, like it had something to get off of its chest, but the apparition never spoke. The two of them make eye contact. The apparition turns and disappears through this wall. While that's going on down here, the officer on the main floor, he hears footsteps following him back and forth. All of a sudden, he hears extremely loud banging coming from all four walls simultaneously. So he radios out to the officer waiting by the squad cars, and he says, "Look, I know we're close to Duval Street, but tell the tourists to stop banging on the building." The officer outside radios back, "What are you talking about? I'm the only one out here. There's nobody banging on the building." Needless to say, those two officers exit the museum rather quickly. A couple minutes later, the manager comes down from the top of that tower, terrified. He is as white as a sheet, and he is unable to speak. To this day, he cannot and will not talk about what happened at the top of the tower. And I know that to be a fact because, folks, that museum manager is now one of my bosses. But the alarms went off a total of 5 times that night, and there were no intruders found. While resetting the alarm on one of the occasions, the manager notices something rather strange. The date. It was the early morning hours, July 1st, 2009, the 1-year anniversary of this tragedy. Every July 1st since this tragedy took place, very bizarre things happened to and inside this museum, including the tower alarms going off multiple times. On the 10-year anniversary, early morning hours of July 1st, 2018, the tower that stands above us right now got struck by lightning. There's one face that you will never see anywhere near this museum on July 1st, ladies and gentlemen. This one. I made sure it was in my contract, and not only do I avoid this museum, I avoid the entire Mallory Square area like it is the plague. Now, folks, if you want to capture strange things in your photos, please get your cameras out now. We're going to be going upstairs. That is where most people capture Daddy Longlegs, along with the 13 other apparitions that reside inside this museum. As we go up the stairs, you're going to see some names. Those are the names of the wreckers and their ships that we have had over the years. So, ladies and gentlemen, follow me. Now, folks, I invite you to walk around this level and take a lot of photos, okay? Like I said on the trolley, flash or no flash, that doesn't matter, but you do want to take 3 or 4 of them in a row. Most people capture things by standing on that side of the room with their camera aimed up the staircase to the 2nd floor balcony. Also by taking pictures of the piano area here, and then that far back corner, which I refuse to step foot into. Don't go up the stairs though, because the tower is closed at night. If you go up those stairs, the alarms will go off, the police will come, and then things will get really weird. But folks, while you're taking your photos, I ask that you keep your ears open and you're talking down so I can tell you the next story. Richard, about this precious nugget right here. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have a 64-pound solid bar of pure Spanish silver. Based on just the price of silver alone, it is worth around $25,000. But with the history behind this one, folks, this brick is currently worth over $150,000. But we believe this silver to be cursed because it has sank a total of 6 different Spanish ships and it has killed over 2,000 men. Each one of those ships were trying to take it to the King and Queen of Spain, and we know that to be true by the Roman numerals up at the top. That is the silver's serial number. They have the logs of the ships that this bar of silver has been on. I only have enough time to tell you about the last Spanish ship that this bar sank. Her Spanish name, Nuestra Senora de la Maravilla. In English, Our Lady of Marvels. Part of a fleet of 7 Spanish ships trying to salvage this and other cargo from a shipwreck the previous year off the coast of what's now called Ecuador. On their way back to Spain on January 4th, 1656, a very large, powerful storm came up, spun the fleet of 7 ships around in a circle. Our Lady of Marvels was the tail ship, and she gets broadside by the lead ship, the Capitana. As both ships start breaking apart, Captain of Our Lady of Marvels calls out to his Catholic priest on board, Father Diego, and asks him to start taking confessions and issuing last rites. 650 men on board. 45 survive. Father Diego and the 44 men he was able to bless. Now, after sinking Our Lady of Marvels, this silver sat at the bottom of the ocean for over 300 years. It was salvaged by a U.S. diving team in 1986. They drug it behind their boat to Key West. They put it under lock and key to never again sink another vessel. If you dare, at this time you can come up, you can touch it, you can even try to lift it. But those of you who do, I want you to keep this one thought in mind. The only thing that's sealing your fate after you touch this bar of silver is the solid ground that we're standing on. You'll never see me dead on a boat with this bar of silver, and that pun is always intended. Folks, if any of you are going on a boat, jet ski, paddleboard, kayak, or an airplane within the next 48 hours, I strongly suggest you do not touch the silver. But who's brave enough to come touch it? There's one in every group. Well, it'll give you a good arm workout. Now, those of you who do not want to touch the silver, this bar of silver is not like Robert the Doll. No harm will come to you if you come up and look at it or even take its picture. It is only if you touch it that you are cursed. Unfortunately, I have to touch it every night at work. But that is one reason why you will never see this ugly face on a boat in Key West, Florida. And if I am going on a boat, folks, I stopped touching this silver 3 days prior to that boat trip. I've heard too many stories. But you'll see the Roman numerals right up there. Mm-hmm. That gouge right there, that is where they did the purity test, and it came back at 99% pure. When we set up for the tours and we close the curtains, the reason we close them is we don't want the glass reflecting our flash. Okay, that's the only reason why we close it. There were 3 different occasions when I was in that corner and I'm completely by myself and I get physically pushed out of that corner by an icy cold hand in the middle of my back. I think it is the spirit of Asa Tift. His picture is there on the piano in the center. He is the one who used to run those auctions for the shipwreckers. And he was a very, very stern man. A lot of people around the piano will capture the ghost of a little girl about 8 years old wearing a blue dress. People will capture a woman descending the staircase, and several people have captured daddy longlegs. But that is why we did have a host who used to have a ponytail. Used to. When she was in the museum by herself setting up, she got pulled down the staircase by her ponytail, and she was the only one in here. All right. Now, folks, we will go ahead and exit and continue. Oh, wait. Before we exit, if I could have your attention for one moment, because for me personally, folks, there's something very important for me to say. Key West had a very colorful history. Unfortunately, not all colors were pretty. Folks, there are 2 stories coming up in this next half that I personally find extremely offensive, and they make me very angry. But these stories are part of our history. They do have to be told because as a society, we cannot afford to make the same mistakes again. However, the actions that happen in these stories in no way, shape, or form reflect my personal beliefs. And with that being said, we will continue. By a show of hands, is there anybody on board who is missing somebody from their party? Perfect, I didn't knock anybody inside. Second important question, also by a show of hands. Is there anybody on board who wants to be missing somebody from their party? Come and see me after the show because I got a lot of connections. On our way to the museum, I mentioned how wrecking made Key West a very wealthy town. One of the wealthiest wreckers we had was a man by the name of Captain John Geiger. Now, Captain Geiger, he was a master wrecker and a harbor pilot, but many people believe he lived a double life as a plundering pirate because he got so much wealthier than all the other wreckers. Probably for good reason. Folks, Captain Geiger lived in the Audubon House, which is now a museum, but he lived there with his wife and their 12 children. I don't think there was anything to do in Key West before television. 3 children died of yellow fever, and 1 child died falling from a tree in the backyard while his siblings watched. We still see a ghost of a man patrolling the grounds believed to be the ghost of the pirate Geiger watching over his buried treasure. Audubon House is here on our left with the white picket fence. Guys, look at the second floor. The room to the far right has a light on it. That used to be the nursery where their 3 children died of yellow fever. There's such a gloomy feeling in that room that light stays on 24/7. In fact, that room alone is connected to a generator, so even when Key West goes dark in a hurricane, that room never does.
No way.
Wow.
Those 2 offensive stories that I mentioned in the museum, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first one. We are on our way to Jackson Square, home of the Key West Courthouse, the old city jail, and it is also where the gallows stood. The grounds are still charged with the residual energy of everybody hung there. But this story is about a decorated World War I veteran and war hero by the name of Manuel Cabeza. After the war, Manuel returned to his home here in Key West and he opened up a speakeasy on the waterfront. He was so well liked in town, everybody simply called him Isleño, which meant islander. And everybody in town knew he was deeply in love with the beautiful Angela. Now, Angela was of Afro-Cuban descent, and she was employed as a lady of the night. But she fell in love with Manuel. She quit her job. The 2 moved in together, and they lived as husband and wife under common law. Their love was an example of young love at its finest, but it was the Deep South in the 20s. Folks, while they were sleeping on December 23rd, 1921, 6 Klansmen break into their apartment with baseball bats and proceed to beat the war hero. During the struggle, Manuel is able to remove the hood of one of the attackers, and he recognizes one of his own bar patrons, a prominent man by the name of William Decker. But those Klansmen, they bound that veteran, they threw him into the trunk of their car, they took him to the outskirts of town, they tarred him, feathered him, hung him from a tree, beat him like a piñata, and left him to die. Angela was able to cut him down, clean him up, and tend to his wounds, but she couldn't heal his pride. The next day, Christmas Eve, the war hero rolls out of bed with a ruptured kidney. He grabs his army-issued revolver, he hails a cab and starts driving through town searching for Decker. He finds Decker 1 block over on Duval Street. He has the cab driver pull up. He leans his head out of the cab window. He looks Decker square in the eye and he says, "Decker, this is how a real man kills a man," and shoots him point blank in the forehead, dead in the street, broad daylight. He jumps out of the cab, he runs home to his gorgeous wife Angela, and he waits. Sheriff Curry shows up with 6 National Guard. They arrest him and they bring him to our city jail. If you look to your right, you see our courthouse. To the right of the courthouse, you see a large wall, and the building behind that wall is the old city jail. But it's Christmas Eve. Sheriff Curry sends the National Guard home to enjoy the holiday. He lays the war hero Selkie on the counter, and conveniently he forgets to lock the jail and goes home. Shortly after midnight, which means the very first thing Christmas Day, 2 cars drive down this very street with their headlights off. They pull into the parking lot of the jail, and 6 more. Yes, we are the doom. I hate getting doomed during this story, folks. 6 more of those white hooded cowards get out of those 2 cars. They walk into the open and intended jail. They grab the war hero's Selkie. They open his cell, and they beat him to death. But then those Klansmen, they take a decorated U.S. veteran's body out of that jail, and they tie it to the rear bumper of their car. And they drug that vet's body through the streets of town for everybody to see on Christmas Day. They then drag his body through the heart of town, out to the outskirts, where they once again tar, feather, hang from a tree. But this time, each one of those cowards had to shoot him at least once. Cowardly overkill, if you ask me. A couple of days later, in this exact courthouse, the verdict comes back, and I quote, "The murder of Manuel Cabeza was not done by an organized group, but by unknown individuals." End quote. Nobody got arrested. After hearing that verdict, a very angry Angela leaves the courthouse. She walks a few blocks down the street. She goes to Bahama Village. She steps into their cultural center called Congo Hall. At the time, folks, Angela was one of the many people here who practiced Santeria. If you do not know what that is, folks, that is a religion that combines Catholicism with voodoo. She calls upon her Afro-Cuban ancestors. She lights candles, she burns incense, and she sacrifices a chicken. Mixing blood with bone, she cries out to the heavens, death to all who have harmed and slain you. Yes, we are the doomed! And then she completely vanished, never seen again. Local legend has it that every one of those murderous Klansmen, every jury member, and the judge all died a horrifically painful death. So she got her revenge. But if that story does not make you angry, what about the fact that for almost 100 years, one of our very own decorated veterans had a lowly wooden grave marker that got vandalized hundreds of times? In 2019, the mayor of Key West, the Monroe County Sheriff, and the military stationed here gathered in our city cemetery right alongside that War Hill's niece and great niece, and Manuel Cabeza finally received a proper military burial with a granite headstone. You can visit our cemetery during the day and show your respect to that war hero, but I always want to show him some appreciation on the tour, folks, with a round of applause. Now, have any of you been to our Key West Lighthouse yet? No? You have? Those that have you noticed anything unusual about it? Well, see if we can change that. Folks, I apologize, they don't have the uplights on it right now, but it is right here on your right behind the giant banyan tree. Other than it being dark, what's unusual about our lighthouse? Where's the water? Lighthouses are always on the shore.
Mm-hmm.
This one's inland.
Yeah.
Folks, this is our second lighthouse. This one was finished in 1848. The first one was built in 1825, but it was destroyed by the Havana hurricane of 1846. So they built this one inland a little bit to give it a buffer from the storms. The Havana hurricane of 1846 was the single most destructive hurricane ever to hit this island. Folks, that storm hit Key West with sustained winds exceeding 200 miles per hour. Not wind gusts, sustained winds. If today's categories weren't high enough, folks, that would have made it a Category 7 hurricane. Seeking shelter from the storm inside of the lighthouse was the keeper, Barbara Mayberry, and her 6 children. They survived the lighthouse falling on top of them brick by brick. But what the winds destroyed, the waves claimed, and that storm took all 6 children out to sea. She went on to be the keeper of the new lighthouse. She died in that lighthouse, and her spirit still haunts it. In 1846, the only thing in this part of the island was the lighthouse and the original settler cemetery. Storm wasn't done with just a lighthouse, it wanted more. That storm surge came in, it scoured the air, and up came everybody buried in that cemetery. The 200-mile-an-hour winds then scattered the bodies all over the side of the island. The next day when the town people came to check on Mayberry, they found their loved ones in the trees and the bushes. Not knowing who belonged to what skull, torso, arm, or leg, they just picked up all the pieces, took them to the center town, buried them all in one mass grave in what is now our city cemetery. But this part of the island is called South Beach, and it's been used as a burial ground for centuries, especially the naval base to your right. That's where the Calusa buried their dead. Folks, we've been finding bodies here for 200 years. From 1823 to 1826, Commodore David Porter and his Navy squadron were sent to Key West to battle the pirates of the West Indies. This is where he would bury his fallen soldiers to be buried on U.S. soil. Now, directly in front of us is the southernmost point. You see the curved wall in front of it? Folks, that is all that remains of the original lighthouse. It stood right here. Even after the new cemetery was built after the hurricane, if you died of yellow fever, they buried you out here, hoping that keeping you separated from town would stop the spread of the disease. But picture it before these buildings and resorts. You had nothing but sand, palm trees, and a gorgeous view of that ocean. Not a bad place to spend eternity. But in the 1940s, as they're laying pipes for the new city sewer, they found bodies out here. But the workers were told to not relocate them. They were told to just continue laying pipe on top of the bone and go about their day. If any of you are staying on this side of the island, keep that lovely thought in mind tonight when you're taking your evening shower. Out here, you never know what lurks beneath your drain.
They're digging right on this corner. Right
Exactly.
here.
We were wondering about something like that. We were walking.
Now, folks, for me personally, this next story is the most upsetting of the evening. It is a personal choice of mine that if we get any, we do not reply to dooms during this story to show respect for the young victims of the story. In the spring of 1860, The U.S. Navy is searching the waters off of the Florida Keys looking for ships with illegal cargo. They were looking for human cargo. And this was after the sale of humans into slavery had been banned. In May of 1860, right off of Cuba, they captured 3 ships with that cargo. Sadly, all 3 ships were U.S. owned, U.S. flagged, and U.S. captained. They were the William, the Wildfire, and the Bogota. Down in the holds of these 3 ships, they find very inhumane and very unsanitary conditions. They also find chained together over 1,400 young naked children between the ages of 12 and 16 that were kidnapped from their families, being shipped to Cuba to be sold into slavery. The condition on those ships were so bad, those children did not see daylight in over 60 days. They were not even able to sit, folks. They had to lie in their own waste with rats crawling all over them. Those children were starving, sick with disease, and some had already died. The Navy was told to take the children to the closest U.S. port, which happened to be Key West. Our population at that time was around 3,000. In one night, our population exploded by almost 50%. We had no advance notice that they were coming in. We had nowhere to house them. When the children were handed over to the U.S. Marshal, he had to make a quick decision, and he placed the children at the barracks that were being built for Fort Zachary Taylor. They weren't completed yet, but they set up a community, and this is where Key West started to get its motto of one human family. Because every resident town gathered everything they could find to feed, clothe, and comfort the children, and the town paid for all medical care. 80 days after their arrival, Washington, D.C. sent 3 ships down to transport the surviving children back to a newly formed colony in their native country of Africa called Liberia. They were supposed to live out the rest of their days as free men and women, but that didn't happen. When the ships returned to Africa, the surviving children were re-enslaved. But the death and the disease that started on those ships killed 294 innocent children. A local carpenter made coffins for them. They were taken to a remote part of our island and laid to rest on a beach. This beach. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at Higgs Beach. It's a very popular beach, but it is where 294 children are still buried. The following year in 1861, as the Civil War is raging, Washington, D.C. orders the building of 2 additional Union fortifications called martellos. We already had Fort Zach, but they wanted 2 more on the south side of the island, 1.5 miles apart, the distance a cannonball could fly. After they mapped it out, the Army Corps of Engineers here objected because they knew 1 martello would be built on top of the children. But Washington, D.C. did not care and demanded construction. The workers dug in deep. They unearthed several children and reburied them in an unmarked mass grave. And in 2002, a local historian armed with a note map of Key West beaches and ground-penetrating radar found some of the children. Here on your right, though, we have the remains of the never even completed West Martello Tower. Folks, if they weren't even going to complete the structure, why did they have to dig up the children? And now on our right, we have our second burial ground. This is our African cemetery. Folks, I'm going to step off of the trolley here so I can better describe what you're looking at. If you are seated on the left behind Tyler, feel free to stand up if you want to get a better view or come over to the other side, but I do ask that you stay on the trolley. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the continent of Africa. On the west shore of Africa, we have 3 crosses. That is where those 3 ships, the William, the Wildfire, and the Bogota, began their journey. In the center behind the shrub is the compass rose, and then over here we have Florida, Key West, and Cuba. Around Cuba, 3 more crosses, which is where the ships were captured. On top of Key West is a star with a tail. The tail is the path that the surviving children took back to Africa. Now folks, when you come out during the day, I want you to pay close attention to the 15 ovals that you see outlined here in the concrete. This is where 15 of those 294 children are resting. The oval by the W and the compass rose and the one just beyond it by the dove are only 3.5 to 4 feet long. They said that the children were between 12 and 16, but not all of them were. Very small children are buried here, only 2 to 3 feet beneath the surface of the sand. On the perimeter, we have African symbols and blessings, blessing them on their journey. Folks, this monument is very, very powerful. When you come out during the day, you can read their full story on the black sign to the left. But now turn your heads to the other side of the street, and you're going to notice a fairly large green space. In 2010, they start excavating that green space in order to expand the park. And folks, in 2010, they uncover an additional 150 children in that green space. It was determined that the ones found over there were part of the same tragedy as the ones over here. Excavation stopped, the children were covered back up, and that land is now a dedicated sacred space. Nothing will ever be built there. We're never going to hear the voices of these 294 children. But your host tonight does get a little bit of peace to know that these children are finally getting the respect that everybody deserves. And do you know what they discovered when they uncovered those children? Ladies and gentlemen, their bones are the exact same color as yours and mine. Who wants to hear a love story? Too bad, you're going to anyway. Buckle up, buttercups, because this story goes downhill faster than a roller coaster. Let me introduce you to the Count. Dr. Count Carl Tanzler von Kassel. Say that 5 times fast. A brilliant scientific man with 9 collegiate degrees, an inventor and a self-proclaimed count, born in Dresden, Germany in 1877. Came to Key West in 1927, and he built the X-ray department at the Marine Hospital. Beginning at the age of 4, he has a reoccurring vision of a very beautiful woman with long dark hair. That ancestor comes to him in a dream one night, saying one day she will be his bride. Well, April 1930, beautiful Elena Hoyes is brought to that Marine Hospital extremely ill. Diagnosed with tuberculosis, the Count goes in to do her chest X-rays, sees her beautiful face, instantly falls in love, claiming she's a woman of his visions. He showers her with very expensive gifts. He proposes marriage several times. Her family always said no for 3 reasons. 1, they were both already married to somebody else. Kind of a problem. 2, he was not Cuban. Back then that was a problem. 3, he was 35 years older than she was. Ew. So he and Elena, they exchanged wedding vows in secret one night. But sadly, at the age of 22, October 25th, 1931, the beautiful Elena dies of tuberculosis. That grief-stricken Count pays for the funeral and builds her this beautiful mausoleum. He goes inside the mausoleum every day at sundown to have long conversations with her, telling her about his day. He would even spend a night with her on occasion. You know, just the normal stuff. But according to his very own memoirs, one evening she answers him back and begs him to release her from her earthly prison. Doing what every devoted husband would do, he waits until a moonless, starless night in April of 1933, opens up her mausoleum, and he removes her casket. He gently places Elena inside of a wingless flying machine that he made her, which you would call a rocket. He named it the Countess Elena. Gonna send it into space because the sun's radiation would zap her cells back to life. She would then pilot it back down to Key West, and they would spend the rest of their lives as husband and wife. Makes perfect sense, right? Well, this was parked at the Marine Hospital. The administrators of the hospital got tired of looking at it, so they told him to move it. And one night, the Count tows it all the way across town and parks it right there at Rest Beach. He wanted her to be forever at rest. She didn't rest long, though. Children started playing on it and made him nervous that somebody might open it and find his treasure. So he moved her one more time into his house and continued his restoration. Folks, I'm going to put this to you as delicately as possible, okay? He wires her joints together to make her bendable! He fills her body cavities with tubes and cloth to give her that womanly figure. He fixes her porcelain complexion with silk and mortician's wax. He gives her 2 beautiful glass eyes to gaze upon. He makes a wig out of her own hair. He then dresses her in a beautiful white wedding gown. He lays her in his bed and lives with her as husband and wife. Make her fulfill her wifely duties
Oh.
for 7 years. Imagine that beautiful smell. But hey, look at the bright side. At least they never had an argument. Well, or children. Key West started growing in population. Homes were being built around his, and his neighbors complained, but not because of the smell, but because he played her organ music at all hours of the night. His neighbors would see him dancing with what they thought was a life-size doll in his living room. Then he would be seen out in town buying women's clothing, women's jewelry, women's perfume. A lot of perfume. But nobody saw him with a woman. Rumors started flying. Her younger sister Nana heard the rumors, and fearing the worst, she insisted the Count meet her at her sister's mausoleum, and she demands to see her sister's dead body. So the Count invites Nana to his home for dinner. She walks in, and guess what she sees at that dining room table? Her dead, wired, stuffed sister, Elena, who at this point had been dead for 9 years. Well, let's just say Nana loses her appetite. She gets upset with the Count, has him arrested and thrown in jail. They took Elena's body to the Dean Lopez Funeral Home, and they were so impressed with his work, they put her on display and charged admission. In 3 days, 7,000 people traveled to Key West and paid to see the corpse. They even let schools out early so that the school children could come and see her. Pack your brown bag lunch, kids. We're going on a field trip. Well, the Count was deemed to need psychiatric evaluation. He meets with the doctors. He outlines his detailed plans on how he'll give Elena 100% life 9 years after his death. Or her death, I'm sorry. So, the doctors had no choice but to rule him certifiably sane. Sane. Able to stand trial. At the courthouse, the entire town showed up. The judge realized, though, that the only crime that they could charge him with was grave robbery. Because back then, necrophilia was not yet a crime. Now, in case you're wondering, the statute of limitations for grave robbery in the state of Florida is 2 short years. He lived with a corpse for 7, so they had to let him go. As he was leaving the courthouse, he demands the return of his bride, but the town refused and supposedly reburied Elena in an undisclosed location. For fear of his own safety, he had to leave Key West. Hours after his departure, Elena's mausoleum crumbles to the ground, but the Count returned to Zephyr Hills, Florida, to the arms of his estranged wife and children, where he sold postcards. And then he wrote fantastic novels about the fantastic adventures he had with his fantastic wife, Elena! Yes! Folks, he died in 1952. When they found him, he was naked and slumped over a wax effigy of Elena. Or was it? Nobody can show me where her body is. I, for one, think he found her and took her with him. Told you it went downhill fast, didn't I? You know, folks, that story is the inspiration for Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride. See if you ever watched that movie the same way again. If you walk to our left is 701 Passover Lane, the location of our city cemetery. That neighborhood does not allow trolleys because they are a quiet zone and I have a big mouth, but you can go there during the day and show your respect to the war hero. Stroll through the cemetery and read the interesting headstones, like the one for the town hypochondriac. Hers says, "See, I told you I was sick." But my favorite is for that of the town womanizer. His wife put on his headstone, "At least I know where he's sleeping tonight." Now this neighborhood is close to our historic seaport. This is where we see the houses with the haint blue porch ceilings and trim. It's a very safe neighborhood today, but in the 40s and the 50s, not so much. Nice people like you would not come anywhere near this neighborhood, especially at night. If you did, you'd be found dead on the sidewalk the next morning. It's a very dangerous neighborhood. Bars, gambling dens, cockfighting arenas, and brothels. And the violence was so high when the shrimpers were in town that these streets were stained red with blood from all the shootings and the stabbing. Now, shrimping was a tough job back then. Those poor men spending weeks or a month out at sea without their 3 W's. No whiskey, no wine, no women. Come to Key West with a load of shrimp, get paid in cash, come here searching for their whiskey, their wine, and their beautiful women. You know the type. The ones that charge by the hour. Go to the bars, visit the gambling dens, and then take their winnings to the brothels. A building built with very large red doors on it in the 1860s. In the 1940s, they took the main floor of that building and turned it into a long-running bar called the Red Door Saloon, which quickly got the nickname the Bucket of Blood because it became the single most dangerous bar in the entire Gulf Coast. So dangerous, gentlemen, that if you went there without a weapon, the bouncer handed you one at the door. Now, above the bar was a brothel. They renovated the brothel about 35 years ago and turned it into apartments. Construction workers found hundreds of dusty, empty wallets of men behind the wallboards. Madams would pickpocket their male counterparts when they were passed out behind the walls and the wallboards. Though no longer a bar, the building still has those iconic red doors. Gentlemen, I think you'll agree with me. It is more terrifying today than when they called it the bucket of blood. And gentlemen, if you dare, look to your left. The Red Door Saloon. Today it's a very upscale clothing boutique. And gentlemen, I warn you right now, you so much as step foot through that door, and your wallets are still emptied. Now, just like that Red Door Saloon, over the years a lot of our buildings have had to be repurposed and some have had to be moved. But that haunted history gets passed down from owner to owner. Since Key West is one of the most haunted bars in America, are you surprised to hear me say that we are home to a lot of haunted bars and morbid watering holes? There's a haunted bar that's a favorite for the locals, and its name, Shots and Giggles. Unfortunately, not every shot was served with a giggle. It used to be the one-bedroom home of Frank Pontus, a well-liked socialite and friend and gardener for the playwright Tennessee Williams. Now, he was shot on his front porch, and he managed to crawl partway into the house before expiring. When they find Frank the next day, they find his house completely undisturbed and full of cash, so it was not a burglary. Now, folks, don't worry, Frank is a party animal. In fact, he doesn't want the party to end. He keeps interrupting the closing bartender's routine by turning their lights on, their music on, and when they take the trash out, he has to take the bar stools off of the bar and put them back on the floor. And they have to play his favorite song at least once before leaving. Any guesses? Dancing Queen! Now, folks, on the anniversary of his death one year, one of the not-so-smart bartenders thought it would be a cute little joke to draw a chalk outline of Frank on the floor where he was found. He didn't find it funny. Next day, that bartender walks in to open up, turns on the light switch, and every light bulb explodes in the building, including the ones still in the packaging. Sounds like Frank needs to lighten up a little bit, wouldn't you say? But right here on your left is Shots and Giggles. And that's the front porch where he was shot. Now, another favorite morbid watering hole? Captain Tony's. I'm sure you've all heard of that one.
Yes.
That building's been here since 1850, and originally it was a nice house and a morgue. In the 1980s, Captain Tony wanted to expand the bar by enclosing the courtyard. But the courtyard was home to Key West hanging tree. It's bad luck to cut down a hanging tree, so he built the extension around the tree. In 2017, Hurricane Irma gave the tree a haircut at the roof line, but the rest of the tree is still... Yes! We are the doomed! The rest of the tree is still inside Captain Tony's. Once we get through this intersection, the yellow building on our left will be Captain Tony's. Look through the first set of black open doors to that building and you will see the Key West hanging tree. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, look through these doors right here. There is the Key West hanging tree. Now, at the base of that tree is a headstone for Reba Sawyer, who died in 1950 at the age of 50. Upon her death, her husband found a whole bunch of love letters written by another man. She would meet that gentleman here at Captain Tony's to have their love affair. After Reba's funeral, her husband sneaks into the cemetery at night, digs up her headstone, drags it behind his car across town, placing it at the base of that tree, declaring if Reba liked it that much in life, she could like it that much in death. But the best part about Captain Tony's is when they were doing those renovations in the 1980s, they wanted to replace the floor. When they pulled up the old floor, that's where they found your host, Bartender Joe, along with 19 other dead people. That is correct. In the 1980s, 20 dead bodies found in the floor of Captain Tony's. And they did not relocate us before putting the new floor down. They put it right on top of us. So let's just say very strange things happen inside this bar besides people getting drunk. Over by the pool tables is another headstone. Headstone for Miss Elvira Edmonds. When the women use the ladies' room there, a lot of times they'll see a woman standing behind them in a blue dress. That is the ghost of Elvira Edmonds in her burial gown. Now, folks, it kills me to say this, but our time together has come to a dead end. Yes, we are the doom. I think that was the doom anyway. Folks, if you had a good time tonight and you want to write a review, please go to TripAdvisor Let them know Bartender Joe and the great Tyler gave you a great tour. Speaking of Tyler, give this man a big round of applause for his excellent driving. If any of you did not have a good time tonight and you're going to go to TripAdvisor and write a review, my name is Ben and this is Jerry. All kidding aside, Tyler's going to bring the trolley safely to a stop in the parking lot. He will exit the trolley first to put down the step. Folks, once you leave this trolley, that doom is lifted and you are free to enjoy the rest of your time here in Key West. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for spending part of your Wednesday night with us. Guys, you have been a true pleasure, and I wish you all a most excellent evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's